Funding for this program is provided by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of the complete line of Cajun King seafood seasoning mixes and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Louisiana. Hello, I'm Chef John Folse, welcoming you to this great state of ours. We're real proud of our people, places, and food, and I'd like for you to know a little bit more about it. So join me and some of my friends as we visit the historical food towns of this state and cook up another great Taste of Louisiana. Everybody, and welcome to A Taste of Louisiana. I'm Chef John Folse, and I'm excited about you visiting with me today as we go to the land of Audubon. We're visiting some of the historical food cities of Louisiana, and today we're going to the rolling Felicianas to the town of St. Francisville. Here we are in the Virginia country of Louisiana, as it's called. This is Grace Episcopal Church, built in the early 1800s, and one of the earliest Episcopal congregations in Louisiana. Typical of the architecture of the rolling Felicianas, these beautiful, beautiful homes. Most of them are open to the public, like Virginia, just about every day of the week. Notice this rolling, even on the streets, these nice little hilly areas, untypical of Louisiana. This is St. Francisville Inn, and it's open to the public every day. Magnolia Cafe was a gas station at one time, and it's one of the great restaurants in that area. This is beautiful Rosedown Plantation, built in 1835 by Mr. Turnbull. And today, as you enter these beautiful Oak Tree Alley here, this is almost like Oak Alley Plantation in South Louisiana, you get a feeling of being in the romantic Old South. Today, Rosedown has 30 acres of magnificent gardens with these beautiful Italian marble statues and this little summer cottage with the fountains. This is almost like a garçonniere or a little gazebo. Formal gardens everywhere, and some of the great camellia bushes and the oldest camellia bushes in Louisiana are found right there at Rosedown Plantation. Now we go to Oakley Plantation. This is the Audubon commemorative, it's a commemorative state area. And it's really one of the true wilderness areas of Louisiana. John James Audubon spent some time at this beautiful place, and we're going to talk about that in a little while. This is the Bourne Museum, where you can walk through and see some of the great early farm implements of Louisiana farming. Again, some of these formal gardens, a lot of them around Oakley as well. This is the outdoor kitchen, and there's cooking demonstrations held here every now and then. You just have to check to find out when. An old water system. Look at this beautiful area, all the natural foliage, gorgeous oak trees. What a wonderful place for John James Audubon to spend some time in Louisiana. This is naturally the dining room, and the shoe fly, or the punka as it was called. This not only circulated air in the dining room, but naturally kept the flies off of the table. That's kind of disgusting, isn't it? But I guess those things happened even in beautiful plantation days of Louisiana. Here's John James Audubon's bedroom, and again, we're going to talk about that in just a minute, but here's some of the artifacts that Audubon probably used when he stayed in this room in the early 1800s, 1821. Some of his specimens, there's a little drawing, snakeskin on the table, and I heard that Audubon got in trouble for leaving some birds like this. I guess it kind of smelled up the house a little. Here's his portrait. It may even be a self-portrait. The Birds of Audubon. 80 of them were actually painted here in Louisiana. That's almost, what, 1/3 of his collection. The brown pelican, the state bird of Louisiana. Audubon came here in 1821 and spent about 4 months as a tutor, and my guest today in the kitchen is someone who knows a lot about his time here in Louisiana, also knows a lot about Oakley Plantation, because Anne Butler is not only a historian and a writer, her family is one of the first to come and settle the Felicianas and settle in and around St. Francisville. So Anne Butler will be here just a little while later to talk more about John James Audubon. Okay, what are some of the foods of these beautiful plantations in the Felicianas? I mentioned that it was called the Virginia territory of Louisiana. Well, not many people called it that, but when you see the rolling lands and the beautiful landscape, the mansions, you can see why some people would have referred to it as the Virginia-looking area of South Louisiana. Look at this beautiful platter here. I found out that Audubon loved to hunt, and he went out and did a lot of game, killed a lot of game, not only for drawing, but also for cooking and eating. Most of his portraits even have the gun and the powder keg. But here, one of the dishes that I know that Audubon loved a lot was the veal shanks, and not only veal shanks, but game shanks like venison shanks, pork shanks, which were really big in plantation days. Here, we have two gigantic veal shanks. Look at the meat that's on the side of this bone. Now, of course, this is going to be a very flavorful piece of meat when it's baked for a couple of hours because it's full of marrow. There's a lot of marrow in that big bone, which will make a wonderful sauce. And when we bake this shank with mushrooms and wild mushrooms, this is the oyster mushrooms of Louisiana swamplands and bayou country. That goes into the dish as well. Carrots, I've got tourneed carrots and Louisiana yams would surround the dish, and peas and little bitty pearl onions. But all other great flavors of Louisiana went into the shanks of Audubon. So I'm going to put them into this roasting pan and season them up just a little bit with the traditional seasonings that we would normally use when seasoning any other meat, whether it's game or domesticated here in Louisiana. A little salt, a little bit pepper, naturally, and again, use some of your own herbs and spices. You know, I tell you that all the time. A little basil, a little thyme, and then I'm going to surround the shanks with some little fresh peas, some little bitty onions, little bitty pearl onions, some of the wild mushrooms as well as bigger onions, garlic, you know how much I love garlic, mushrooms, and then celery. You have to have a lot of celery around this dish. And look at these beautiful carrots and yams. I'm going to sprinkle them in. Not only is this a tasty dish, but look how beautiful it comes together as well. Now, a little rosemary, some rosemary in for flavor, and a little thyme. Now, you could actually take these veal shanks and braise them off in a little hot oil to sear in the juices and the liquids if you would like. But it's not necessary if you're going to bake them for a couple hours, as it's going to take to tenderize these shanks. I'm going to put a little stock in here. This is chicken stock. However, you could put beef stock and bouillon. You get the little bouillon cubes in the store. Feel free to go ahead and use those. But you would put this in about a 375 to 400 degree oven, and you would let this bake for about 2 hours until the shanks become very, very tender. Of course, the marrow is going to make a wonderful gravy or sauce in the bottom of this pan, and you don't want to get rid of any of that because it's almost like a vegetable soup if you think about it. Mushrooms, carrots, celery, bell pepper, all those wonderful flavors that we threw down into the dish, as well as the fresh herbs. Bake it covered or uncovered. If it's in a low oven, you can bake it uncovered. 400 degrees, 375, I would cover it with a little foil for the first hour or so, then brown it. I'll put this out of the way because I have one ready for you in the oven. I want to show you. Take a look at this. Boy, I tell you, no wonder Audubon loved this dish. Take a good close look at those beautiful shanks. You can see just how tender they are by looking at them. You can see how the meat is pulled away from the bones. Really nice. And I want to plate this veal shank up for you. And look what I'm going to plate it up in. I'm going to plate it in this beautiful spode platter. The spode platter came to Louisiana probably in the early 1800s, and one like this certainly would have been found at Oakley or Rosedown or one of those other great Feliciana plantations. I'm going to put that shank right in the middle. Imagine putting this on that dining room table with that big shoo-fly fan going on top of it. What a wonderful place to be. A little bit of the gravy and the vegetables. You wouldn't want to leave any of this down in the bottom of the baking dish. Now, this could have been substituted naturally for a big turkey or a roasted goose or any game dish that would have been served on the table any Sunday or for holidays. It wouldn't really matter. This is a beautiful dish. It plates up so nicely, and it's very easy to serve too. I'll put a little gravy or sauce right on top. Look how thick and rich this gravy has become with the natural marrow of the shanks. And again, this is veal shanks. However, any shanks, whether it was pork or venison, would have worked perfectly. I'll color it a little. I don't know why I need color on this dish. So pretty. And then a little parsley to finish it off. That's right there, the veal shanks of John James Audubon, I'm going to call this dish. I tell you, I know you wish they were your veal shanks, huh? I'm going to move them right here, out of the way. The second dish that I'm going to do for you is a dish that originated, about 45 minutes up the highway in the town of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. This is a spinach dish, and I'm sure that this dish was also found on most of the plantations. However, this dish I know is a very big dish in the state capital of Louisiana, Baton Rouge, which is, as I say, about an hour south of St. Francisville. We're going to begin this spinach Madeline, as we call it. Some people call it spinach marguerite, but I'm going to call it spinach Madeline for today. I'm going to put a little bit buttery flavored oil down into my saute pan. And of course, greens were very, very important in early Louisiana cooking. This climate grows a lot of greens. We have collard greens, mustard greens, spinach, beet greens, and all of these things were combined often, not only as vegetables, but as soups and entrees. One of our best gumbos is a gumbo that was served on Good Friday when the Catholics couldn't have meat in South Louisiana, and made a gumbo using all of those greens into the pot and no meat. So greens were very important, and today with this dish we're going to use spinach for our spinach Madeline. Into the black iron saute pan, I'll put a little bit onions. Imagine, I've mentioned this before, but I have to mention it again because I think it's so important that even in vegetable cooking in Louisiana, we had a tendency to want to use vegetables as a flavor. Not many cultures would actually take onions, celery, bell pepper, garlic to put in a dish that you're going to put spinach into, because they would tend to season it down, as I say. Here's a little garlic down into the dish, and of course I have to put some pretty colors, red bell pepper and a little yellow bell pepper. And what I'm going to do is make a white sauce first before I put the spinach into the saute pan. Now, if you can imagine that this is going to be a spinach casserole, or it could become an entree actually if you think about it, because it's going to be so rich and filled with a lot of other ingredients, it could actually become an entree. But all vegetables in early South Louisiana acted not so much as a vegetable, but as a real dish of substance on the table, and this is typical of that dish. All these pretty seasonings will cook together. I'll add a little bit tomato, just a touch at this point, because I want to get the tomato flavor in there. And then I'm going to put some of the andouille sausage or ham or tasso, any one of the flavors of meat that was found on the plantation. Andouille was found everywhere. The Cajun sausage that was ground and put into the casing after it was flavored with garlic and all those wonderful things. I'm going to put the andouille down into it, but ham was everywhere, so ham would have certainly been used in this dish. Wonderful smoked flavor of the andouille. Okay, all of those, look how pretty all of this is coming together. I wish you could smell that garlic and smoked ham coming out of this saute pan. Now, I have to make a white sauce. Normally, you would put a little butter, put flour into it, stir it around until it's cooked, and add cream. That would be a typical white sauce. No way, not here in South Louisiana. We're going to saute all those seasonings first and then sprinkle our flour down into the dish, because we want the butteroo, which is what I'm making here, to pick up all of the wonderful flavors of that smoked meat, onion, celery, bell pepper, of course, garlic, naturally. Look how that roux just comes together, and now we have a flour that's actually full of flavor. Into this, I'm going to add a little heavy whipping cream, because we are making a white sauce. So I'll pour heavy whipping cream right down into the saute pan. Now, I want you to remember, this is a spinach dish, and you hadn't even seen spinach yet. Spinach Madeline, a lot of good flavor. Now that the white sauce comes together, you can see quickly this isn't a typical white sauce of anywhere else in the United States. And I add a little bit more cream. And then you could use, I want to mention, you could use skim milk. Could use a little yogurt in here if you want to stay away from the heavy whipping creams. That's okay too. But once I add the cream, if I want to stay away from adding too much, then I would add a little bit chicken stock to thin it out. That way I can still get the texture I'm looking for, but certainly wouldn't have to have all of the heavy cream flavor. Okay, or the richness, I should say, in calories of the cream. Okay, once that's all done and I've got my white sauce, now I'll add the other ingredients. I'm going to add a little bit tomato, the rest of the tomato. I'm going to add jalapenos, chopped jalapenos, right down into the dish, and that's going to give it the spiciness, and then a little bit of cheddar cheese, and that's going to melt in the white sauce. And basically, what do we have here? We have a typical Louisiana au gratin. I'm going to lower that flame. We have a typical Louisiana au gratin sauce. If I added crab meat to this right now, I would have a spectacular baked au gratin dish. Now, the seasonings are all coming together. I'm going to add the chopped spinach. Now, the spinach is already blanched, and I've got it in my little bowl, already blanched, already chopped. It's looking real nice. I'll add it right down into the white sauce mixture. Can you imagine that this is a vegetable? Think about that for a minute. I'll stir this all around, and once it gets all mixed into the dish, as I'm doing here, I would either put a little breadcrumbs on top of it. I could certainly do that. And I would put it into a casserole dish and bake it in the oven. Or, as I would do, I would leave it in this black iron skillet, this wonderful black iron skillet, and put it in the oven with little breadcrumbs to make sure that I can use it as a serving dish. Now, I'll move this out of the way because I have one that's already done, and let me cut that fire off. I want to show you what it looks like when it's finished. Take a look at this. This is my spinach Madeline as it would be served right in this beautiful skillet. Let me put a little color on there so you can see it. Put a little color down on it. Now, this would go right onto the table as a separate dish, as a side dish, but a side dish of a tremendous amount of substance rather than just a vegetable. Remember that. This is South Louisiana. That's our vegetable. What would I serve this with? Well, let me see. One of the great plantations of the Felicianas is asphodel, and asphodel is famous for its asphodel bread. And this bread is made with a biscuit mix, and it doesn't have to be kneaded. You just put all the ingredients together, let it rise once, punch it down, and I've got a great recipe I'm happy to share with you on this. I'll give it to you a little bit later, and then that's what it looks like when we slice it up. Asphodel bread. Okay. Now, I told you a couple minutes ago that I had a wonderful friend, Anne Butler, who was going to come to visit with me. Anne is a historian, and she's a food writer, a cookbook author. How you doing? Great to see you. Good to see you again. How you been?
Well, fine, and I brought you a present, a book about Audubon written by his wife with a lot of excerpts from his diary that talk about all the wonderful foods he ate in the Felicianas.
Well, I tell you, we've talked about Audubon so much. I enjoy spending the time up there. Now I have something I can sit down in bed at night and actually read about it. Thank you so much for this. This is great. Okay. What a wonderful costume. Is this of the period? This is
of the Audubon period. These are the costumes that are recreations of the 1820s clothes worn while Audubon was in the Felicianas. This is what the hostesses at the Audubon pilgrimage wear in the Felicianas.
Well, that's fantastic. And so it's authentic then. It's not just something off of a costume, right?
Oh, very authentic.
You know, when I was visiting with you, you showed me some of the beautiful things that were in and around the Oakley house and that Audubon probably used himself. And I want to share some of those. This piece, very particular, this piece is of particular interest to me. Why don't you tell us a little bit about exactly what it is? Or
This is a large silver venison cover, which would have covered a platter of game. Now, this is from Catalpa Plantation and was buried in the pond there during the Civil War to protect it from the Union soldiers as they came through.
And so this was buried, yeah, there's a lot of wear on it, I can see that. What a beautiful piece with a little dog for the handle. Really, really nice. Now, you brought me a couple pieces of china, and I found the china to be very interesting. This is a piece that has a bird on it. Now, is this from Audubon?
This is Old Paris china of the style. Audubon painted quite a number of sets of china to make a living before he had his bird plates printed. Now, this is from Butler Greenwood Plantation. but is of the same period and style as Audubon's china.
So he made a living actually painting china while he was in the neighborhood.
China, painting portraits, doing anything he could to earn a living.
One of the other pieces of china that you brought from the plantation I found very interesting because I'm a coffee drinker. And this coffee cup is about at least 2, maybe 2.5 cups of coffee would go into this cup. Was this normal in the days of the plantation?
That was normal. The plantation owners had a huge breakfast and would go out and cover the plantation, supervise the work in the fields, then come back in mid-morning and have more coffee from a large cup of that type, which is Old Parish china also.
Well, I think if I had 1 cup of this early in the morning, I could keep going for about 2 or 3 days, right? It's a great coffee cup. And for someone who loves coffee, I guess that's about the cup you'd need to drink it out of. I want to ask you a couple questions about St. Francisville. When I think of it as a really nice little pristine village, very quiet, wonderful little town. But you were telling me one day that St. Francisville had a very rowdy beginning.
Well, just under the hill from St. Francisville was a settlement called Biosera, where the flatboaters would stop as they traveled the Mississippi. And around that settlement, a large port grew up with 1 mile of warehouses to store cotton that they would ship from the plantations inland. There were stores and hotels and saloons and houses, but with no levees on this side of the Mississippi River. All of that has washed away now. But it was a very busy port, in fact, the busiest port on the river between New Orleans and Memphis in 1850. Up the hill from Biosera was where St. Francisville developed. Around 1807, the streets were laid out and the first lots were sold. That was considerably quieter. In fact, the early residents were all dead because the monks from Point Coupee came across the river to bury their dead on the highlands, safe from the floodwaters. So then the town grew up around that.
You know, the first trip into the Felicianas will tell a visitor quickly that it is different from any other place in this country. I certainly think so. It's not only gorgeous, but the landscape itself is different. What makes the Felicianas, in your opinion, so different?
Well, it's not only different from any place in the country, it's different from anywhere else in Louisiana. This is English Louisiana. The settlers came down from the East Coast originally, most of them at the time of the American Revolution, with which they were not much in favor. And with them they brought their culture and their heritage and their way of cooking and living. This was also not part of the Louisiana Purchase. This little corner of Louisiana and the Felicianas stayed with Spanish West Florida until 1810, so that the early places have a little Spanish influence. But the terrain is very similar to that in Virginia and Pennsylvania, the areas of the East Coast from which the early settlers had come.
One of the great things that I did when I visited with you last, I want to continue to chat about Audubon. We hadn't even talked about him yet, and he's of great interest to me. But one of the things that you served when I was there visiting with you last was this great big glass of sassafras tea. And you were telling me that sassafras tea was the chosen beverage of the plantation owners because it was available, and I would like to share with these people that great recipe for sassafras because it's so, I think it's almost indigenous to this part of the country. We know it well, and maybe some of the people out there might be able to duplicate that recipe. How about that big sassafras root? I want to show them this first of all. This is a piece of sassafras that we would just dig right off of the root of the tree, and when you cut into this root, it is so full of flavor. I have one that's already cut into right here. As you cut into the bark, it starts to release that fabulous sassafras. It's just like root beer. In fact, I guess that's where the root beer came from. The early root beer of Louisiana came from boiling the sassafras root. The leaves of this tree were also very important because this is what we ground for filet powder, which went into our gumbo. So once the sassafras root was good and clean like this, we would chip it into little bitty pieces like this. Not too tough of a recipe or a process. And then we would dump it into a pot, I want to show you this, into a pot of boiling water and let this cook for about a half hour or so until all of the great colors and flavor of the sassafras root came right out into the liquid, and you would never throw away the little pieces of sassafras. You would always keep those because you could use them about 6 times, and then after that you could throw them on a barbecue pit or in the smokehouse. Anne, I want you to get a good sip of this. Come on here and get a good sip of this sassafras tea. I want you to take a look at the rich color of this root right here. I'm going to pour that in, and look at that. Take a sip of that. Wonderful. It's fantastic. A question about Audubon. What brought him actually to the Felicianas in 1821?
Well, Audubon came to the Felicianas to tutor the daughter of the family at Oakley Plantation. He had met them on a riverboat. He was at that point a starving artist and was looking for employment. They hired him to teach the 16-year-old Eliza Peary drawing, art, music, dancing, and hair plaiting. He had a number of skills and was to have half of the day free to pursue his artwork and study the birds of the area. He was paid $60 a month.
You told me that he was a very strange gentleman, was he?
Well, he was considered very, very strange of the time, and he had long flowing hair and taught dancing and music and was considered a little peculiar. I do have a place marked in this book that I brought you where he says in his own words that it was one of my fancies to be ridiculously fond of dress, to hunt in black satin breeches, wear pumps when shooting, and dress in the finest ruffle shirts I could obtain from France. So you can imagine what a figure he cut in the Pioneer Woods.
It's strange that he wouldn't have gotten shot himself in the forest of Louisiana.
Yes.
Anne, I want to tell you how much I appreciate you coming to visit with us. I know y'all have the Audubon pilgrimage there every year, and I certainly will be there again this year, as I am every year, to come and tour the wonderful homes. When is that?
It's the third weekend in March. And there are a number of homes and glorious gardens open. There are recreations of early crafts. Now, throughout the year, there are a number of historic homes that are open for touring and for bed and breakfast. So.
And I'll be there. And I want to invite you back to come and visit as we continue to cook up more of these great Taste of Louisiana and maybe even some more food from Audubon. See you later.
Funding for this program was provided in part by Bruce Foods Corporation, makers of Bruce's Yams and other distinctive Louisiana-style food products.
Chef John Folse has written a cookbook that allows you to explore the exciting world of Louisiana cuisine. The Evolution of Cajun and Creole Cuisine is a full-color, 352-page book containing food history and recipes for gumbo, jambalaya, makshu, and other Cajun dishes. For your copy, send a check or money order for $24.95 to Louisiana Public Broadcasting at the address on your screen. To use your credit card, call toll-free 1-800-973-7246 or visit our website at lpb.org.